He's here. You ready? Just stay there, pal. Stay there. Just stay there. Yeah. Just put your hands behind your back.
This is Jack Crawley. At just 19 years old, he was arrested on suspicion of murder, a crime that, without police intervention, would have been the first of many. Crawley was no ordinary teenager, obsessed with the macabre. His aim was to target and brutally kill men he met through dating apps. What made his crimes even more chilling was his lack of remorse. He was caught on camera smirking as his charges were read out. Labelled extremely dangerous by a judge, Crawley seemed, to those who knew him, like nothing more than an oddball. Few could have imagined he was capable of such depravity. His crimes were gruesome, calculated, and undeniably sinister. If he had been born a decade or two earlier, in an era without digital evidence to track him, his killing spree would surely have been far more prolific. Jack Crawley had all the makings to become one of Britain's worst ever serial killers. How he was able to do such things at such a young age is terrifying. I feel that it's almost not real to him, and that maybe now he's in prison, or maybe in years to come he will realise the severity of what he has done. Before we dive in, if you find this video fascinating, then please drop it a like and leave me a comment. And also, if you're new, then hit subscribe so you can see my future videos. It all really helps. Thank you. This video is created solely for educational and documentary purposes. It does not endorse or condone the criminal actions described within. Not much is known about Jack Crawley's childhood. It appears as if he led an unremarkable life. His parents divorced when he was 12, and he did suffer physical abuse from his father. From what I can gather, this was along the lines of beatings. He was seen by people who knew him as a bit of an oddball. He would do things like wear his hood up during the peak of summer. His friends also described him as a fantasist, often making up things that had happened to him in order to impress them. By the age of 19, Crawley had grown into an imposing 6'3" and was working as a security guard at Carlisle's Cumberland Infirmary. But his life outside of work was anything but conventional. In his spare time, he dealt weed and often posted selfies on social media with wads of cash, hinting at a blend of arrogance and detachment from societal norms. Another man who worked at Carlisle's Cumberland Infirmary was 56-year-old Paul Taylor, a catering manager and army veteran. Paul was a devoted husband and father of two, a man deeply rooted in family life. Yet, despite his outward image as a loving and dependable father who would do anything for his children, Paul had a secret that, unknowingly, would lead to unimaginable tragedy. Paul and Jack Crawley had no connection at the hospital, but their lives crossed paths in a much darker way. Paul, in his spare time, had been using the gay dating app Grindr in secrecy. He began talking to Crawley, and the two reportedly met multiple times for intimate encounters. Paul, careful to keep this part of his life hidden from his family, had no idea of the danger lurking behind Crawley's seemingly innocent persona. What Paul couldn't have known was that Crawley had an ulterior motive, and it would lead to horrifying consequences. Over the course of 2023, Crawley and Paul had met a few times and built some trust with one another. They had been meeting for intimate encounters in secrecy. On June 16th, Paul is seen buying 3 bottles of poppers from a shop in Carlisle, a substance which is popular for boosting intimate desire. All seemed to be going well between them, but by October 18th, everything was about to take a sinister turn. That evening, Paul and Crawley arranged to meet again through Grindr, selecting a secluded spot in Carlisle as they had done before. The evening began as any other. Paul's wife saw him laughing at the television, carefree and content. Later, she kissed him goodnight, unaware that this simple gesture would be her last memory of him alive. After she went to bed, Paul quietly left their home in Annan, a town not far from Carlisle, and headed towards the meeting place. He arrived at 11:39 p.m. Meanwhile, Crawley was also on his way, but CCTV footage revealed his chilling preparations. Stopping en route, he purchased coal and 2 lighters. As he walked to the location, he listened to the track Romantic Homicide on repeat, a macabre soundtrack for what lay ahead, with lyrics such as, "I killed you and I don't even regret it. I can't believe I said it, but it's true. I hate you." Most disturbingly, he carried a claw hammer with him, his intentions now certainly sinister. At 11:27 a.m, Crawley was seen on CCTV arriving at the meeting spot. What happened next remains partially unclear, but what is known paints a horrific picture. Whether the two got into Paul's Vauxhall Corsa or spoke briefly is uncertain, but what is certain is that Crawley wasted little time. Suddenly, he pulled out the hammer and launched a brutal attack. He struck Paul's face and skull at least 10 times, delivering blow after blow of unrelenting force. The violence was so severe that Paul's face was described in court as being totally smashed in. Desperate to defend himself, Paul raised his arms, but the strikes broke his elbow, shattering it completely. It was a horrific and brutal death, bludgeoned to death by a hammer. Once Crawley was certain Paul was dead, he dragged his body to the boot of Paul's own car. From there, Crawley drove to a remote and desolate location that he was familiar with, Finglandrig Woods. In the darkness, Crawley made a fire with the charcoal he had bought earlier, but he was only able to burn small portions of Paul's leg and arm before the smell became too much and he gave up. As he was doing this, he claimed to have vomited and passed out numerous times. Afterwards, he buried the semi-charred remains in a shallow grave. Calmly and methodically, Crawley then wiped down the car, cleaning as much blood as he could to eliminate the traces of his heinous crime. Jack Crawley, at just 19 years old, had committed an act of chilling brutality, a calculated and shocking murder that would leave the entire community stunned. By 11 a.m, the morning after the murder, Crawley showed no signs of remorse. Calmly, he ordered Uber Eats to his home, undisturbed by the horrific crimes he had just committed. Around the same time, Paul Taylor's wife Maria reported him missing, her growing unease turning into dread. Paul's daughter, Bethany, sent him a desperate text. "Please come back, Dad." But the chilling truth of Paul's fate would soon begin to unravel. On October 19th, Crawley met up with his friend and fellow hospital security guard, Marcus Goodfellow. At 7:30 a.m, the two planned to drive Paul's car, a Vauxhall Corsa, to Appleby, where Crawley had arranged to sell it for £2,000. Marcus had been working a night shift, and once he had finished, he had gone to meet Crawley, and this is why they had set off so early. Their plan, however, took an unexpected turn. At 8:45 a.m, with Crawley at the wheel, they crashed near Langwathby. Without hesitation, they abandoned the vehicle and called one of Marcus's friends to pick them up. During the ride back to Carlisle, Marcus's friend later described Crawley's demeanour as, and quote, "giddy and excited." Crawley openly spoke about someone dying, almost flaunting the fact, claiming, and quote, "the world's a better place without him. It's getting rid of one more rat." He also went on to say that he was a substance dealer and that he was worse than Jeffrey Dahmer. These statements, all delusions and not true, were references to Paul Taylor. Later that afternoon, the police discovered the abandoned car. Inside, they found heavy bloodstains, 2 bottles of poppers, and intimate paraphernalia in the boot. Alarming evidence that hinted at foul play. It was enough to confirm their worst suspicions. By the following day, October 20th, the first official missing persons appeal for Paul Taylor was launched, complete with photos of his car, in hopes someone could provide answers. Days passed, and on October 26th, Paul's birthday, a second appeal was issued. To the outside world, Paul had simply vanished, but investigators knew that they were dealing with something far more sinister. Suspicions soon fell on Jack Crawley. Now I am not sure how. Maybe officers checked Paul's phone records, but I'm not sure. But soon enough, Crawley was arrested for questioning.
Stay there, pal. Just stay there, stay there, stay there. Just stay there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pull that down, please. It's very annoying.
Happy? Alright, so this moment in time, at 11:54, I'm arresting you on suspicion of murder. You do not have to say anything, be my only defence. If you do not mention, when questioned, something in court.
When confronted by police, Crawley denied even knowing Paul Taylor, weaving the first of many lies in a desperate attempt to cover his tracks. But as investigators dug deeper, damning evidence began to emerge. During a search of Crawley's bedroom at his Sheehan Crescent home, police uncovered a chilling array of items. Among them was a latex pig mask, a skull mask, cable ties, rope, and gaffer tape, tools that shown Crawley's sinister intent. This was seen as a murder kit, but the most incriminating discovery lay hidden beneath the back garden decking. It was a bottle of poppers. It was the same found in Paul Taylor's abandoned car, and it even had traces of Paul's DNA on it. For a time, Crawley managed to evade justice. Without sufficient evidence to charge him, the police released him on bail in mid-November under strict conditions to stay at his grandparents' house in Carlisle. But Crawley had other plans. On New Year's Eve, he skipped bail. In a bizarre attempt to disguise himself, he wore a Hagrid-style wig and used a fake European accent before boarding a train to Penrith. From there, he travelled across the UK, passing through Aberdeen and Glasgow, spending nights in both, before arriving in York on January 4th. Far from laying low, Crawley's twisted mind began plotting again. Almost immediately, he started planning a second deadly mission, one that would rival the horrific brutality of his first crime. When Crawley arrived in York, the first thing he did was purchase a claw hammer from the city's tool station, the same weapon he used in his first murder. He then used Grindr to lure his next victim, again targeting an older gay man by arranging a secret hookup. For the unsuspecting man, this was meant to be a consensual encounter, set to take place at a remote location 10 miles from York. At the agreed meeting point, the man picked Crawley up in his car, and together they drove to a secluded area near Acasta Malbis. The man would later say that Crawley seemed nervous and on edge. Once they arrived, the man attempted to initiate an intimate act, but as he performed, he noticed something was off. Crawley was not aroused. Without warning, Crawley unleashed a brutal attack. Using the hammer he had brought, he struck the man repeatedly on the head, face and arm, in a violent frenzy as the man knelt below him. Blow after blow rained down as Crawley's victim struggled desperately to pull away from the assault. This time, however, Crawley's plan did not succeed. Unlike Paul Taylor, this victim was able to fight back. Despite his injuries, he managed to wrestle the hammer away from Crawley and then threatened him with it. Realizing he had lost control of the situation, Crawley fled the scene, leaving the man bloodied but alive. In the hours that followed, Crawley committed a burglary at a nearby home, stealing clothing, a backpack and a phone charger in an attempt to escape detection. While the victim sustained injuries to his face and head, he survived the ordeal, but it was clear that Crawley had planned to kill again. It was only the victim's resilience and quick thinking that stopped the second attempt of murder. Jack Crawley's second arrest came on February 2nd, 2024, in the city of Bath. This time, he was caught in possession of a knife and a quantity of weed. Following his arrest, Crawley was charged with both murder and attempted murder. Here, you can see the officer reading out Jack's charges, but he simply does not care and begins to smirk at some commotion happening elsewhere. In my opinion, he is trying to show that he is in control. During his initial interrogations, he strongly denied killing Paul Taylor. However, after 3 months in custody, on May 1st, 2024, Crawley finally admitted to the murder, and he revealed the location of Paul's remains, buried in a shallow grave. The trial began on October 1st, and it was here that Crawley's delusions and fabrications were fully exposed. Taking the stand, Crawley spun a bizarre and outlandish tale, claiming he had been working for a mysterious criminal organisation. He said, and quote, "I worked for a mafia gang," later referring to the gang as Central Grove Mafia. Crawley alleged that Paul's death was the result of a car theft gone wrong. According to his account, he needed Paul's vehicle to complete a job for the gang, a raid on a weed farm, and another burglary. He claimed he had been in debt to the gang since his teenage years and was regularly forced to tax, aka steal, from other criminals. Pressed by prosecutor Mr. McLachlan to provide names of his supposed gang members, Crawley refused, saying, and quote, "If I give you names, do you think they're going to be happy about that? What do you think they'll do? They know where my family is. They know where my mum lives." Crawley described the events of October 18th, saying that he punched Paul Taylor twice in the face, causing the older man to collapse to the ground. He also claimed that as he fell, he hit his head on the concrete, and then he lay there, making unsettling and quote, snorting noises. Crawley said, "I knelt down beside him. There was blood on my hands. I couldn't find a pulse." He then said he tried to revive him using CPR. He was desperate, but his efforts failed. What followed was a chilling admission. Crawley said that after realising Paul was dead and after failing to burn the body, he then resorted to using a mallet to shatter his skull. He said, and quote, "I wanted rid of the body." He believed that the skull would, and quote, crumble into ash, making it easier to conceal. The cold, calculated nature of his confession revealed a deeply disturbing mindset, one focused entirely on erasing any trace of his crime. Gruesome evidence presented to the jury contradicted Crawley's narrative. Graphic images revealed Paul's shattered skull, broken into 35 distinct pieces, with 230 additional fragments scattered across the area, and some fragments were never recovered. When the court pathologist described the extensive injuries, Crawley suddenly appeared nauseous. The colour drained from him, and then he was sick in the dock. Security staff escorted him from the glass-fronted dock, while attendants covered the area with tissue. He had no problem committing these crimes in the darkness, but in the cold light of day, he was physically sick at the sight of his own crimes. In another attempt to explain away incriminating evidence, Jack offered an absurd explanation for Paul's fractured elbow, which experts identified as a defensive injury. He claimed it was caused accidentally when he slammed the car boot on Paul's arm whilst putting his body in the boot. He also claimed that he bought the charcoal and lighters on his way to meet Paul because it was his job to raid the weed farm and he may have had to burn it down, so he needed something to start a fire. Despite Crawley's increasingly desperate lies and delusional claims, the evidence told a far more harrowing and damning story. His fabricated tale of mafia involvement unravelled under scrutiny, leaving little doubt about his guilt. He also claimed that he attacked the second man in York because he had pulled a knife out on him during their meeting, but the man would later testify in court and said, and quote, "He didn't say anything. It was all very quick. He just basically wanted to hurt me. He was very aggressive." Only Jack Crawley knows the true motives behind his horrifying actions. In court, prosecutors suggested he had an unhealthy obsession with Jeffrey Dahmer, speculating that he might have targeted gay men in a similar vein. Yet, the true reason behind his gruesome choices may always remain a mystery. During the trial, Crawley was confronted with his lies, particularly his outlandish claim of being involved with a mafia gang. "Your life is just one big lie, isn't it, Mr. Crawley?" the prosecutor asked. Crawley responded, "Do you say I'm lying about my involvement in gang crime? You say I'm making it all up?" The prosecutor replied, "I am suggesting you are not controlled by anyone. You did what you did. You killed a man for no reason. That's what I'm guessing." In the end, the jury found Crawley guilty of murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 37 years. If and when he is released, Crawley will be a similar age to his victim, Paul Taylor, at the time of his death. As the sentence was delivered, Crawley showed no emotion, his demeanour as cold as his crimes. Meanwhile, 20-year-old Marcus Goodfellow, who was also on trial for assisting Crawley in disposing of Paul Taylor's car, was acquitted. The court determined that Marcus had no knowledge of the murder. After the verdict, Paul Taylor's family issued a heart-wrenching statement. "Our lives and world were completely torn apart on October 18th, 2023, with the murder of Paul. To us, he was a husband and a dad, gentle and loving. For many years, Paul worked to protect his country, sacrificing time as a husband and a father. Now was supposed to be the time for us to be that family unit. We grieve the loss of that future and of Paul himself. Losing him in these circumstances and the torment and hurt this has caused has been horrendous and indescribable. Paul will be dearly missed and he will remain in our thoughts forever." To think, Jack Crawley is so young, and now he's going to spend the best years of his life locked up with some of the worst criminals in Britain. What a horrific existence. I feel sorry for Paul and his family for having to go through such a horrific ordeal. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay sane.